Hello YouTube, CivilianSnowman here, and today I'm going to review Quentin Tarantino's new film, Inglorious Basterds. The plot follows Lieutenant Aldo Rain, or Aldo the Apache, played by Brad Pitt, and his band of Jewish-American soldiers dubbed the Bastards, who go into Nazi-occupied France undercover and to basically kill as many Nazis as possible. So that's pretty much the plot as we know it from the trailers. However, there is another plot that runs parallel to this, which is a young girl who escaped her family being slaughtered by a man called Colonel Hans Lander, played by Christoph Waltz. She escaped the massacre and wants revenge, so you've got the revenge plotline running parallel to the Bastards plotline. So yeah, that's pretty much the film in a nutshell. Now, I must admit, I was wary going into this film for a number of reasons, the first of which being that I know Tarantino rushed the production of this film for the Cannes Film Festival, and I wondered whether or not he will have compromised some of the, not necessarily integrity, but quality of the movie in order to get it churned out in a matter of months. And let me just say that for the most part, that's not the case. It feels like a well-made, well-edited movie with a couple of exceptions, which I'll get into later. So that worry was kind of out the window. You know, that doesn't really apply. I think Tarantino's done quite a good job of making a film in such a short space of time. Another thing that worried me, however, was the fact that, as I've said in previous videos, I'm a huge fan of Tarantino. He's probably one of my favourite directors, if not my favourite director of all time. And I always think that there's like a distinct difference between pre-Kill Bill Tarantino and post-Kill Bill Tarantino. And I love both, don't get me wrong. I think Kill Bill is a masterpiece and I love Death Proof. So it's not like bias in that sense. But in pre-Kill Bill, his work, like Reservoir Dogs, Pulp Fiction, Jackie Brown, it was more, not necessarily self-contained, but it was a bit smaller. The scripts were slightly tighter. The homages to different past movies weren't intrusive. And it just felt like a more well-rounded experience, those films, to me. And then he made Kill Bill, which I think is a masterpiece, don't get me wrong. But Kill Bill Volume 2 and Death Proof kind of became a little bit self-indulgent. And while I know, yeah, you can get away with that in Death Proof because, you know, Death Proof's just intended as a trashy grindhouse movie, you know, so why not reference yourself and all the movies you love? You know, go for it. Because that's the kind of film that Death Proof is. But with this movie, I found some, not all, but just some of the little kind of winks to even his own career a little bit distracting. For example, in some scenes they use music taken directly from the two Kill Bill movies, and while that music works perfectly in Bastards, you know, the music perfectly suits the scenes and really adds some charisma to the sequences, you can't help but have it drag you out of the movie, because rather than sit there and like on the edge of your seat and think, yeah, this is, you know, this brilliant music fits perfectly, blah blah blah, you think, oh shit, I've heard that music before in Kill Bill Volume 2 or Kill Bill Volume 1, you know. You can't help, once you recognise the music, you can't help but wonder where it's from. But with me, it was more like I just instantly recognised it from the Kill Bill movies, and that kind of took me out of the movie. And which is a shame, because the music fits perfectly. It's not just recycling music just to be self-indulgent in this movie. He's doing it because it fits, but it just I can't help but be slightly distracted. But that's one of the minor niggles I have with Inglorious Basterds. Another thing is the kind of mishmash tone of the movie, and because at times, I know it was never going to be a historically accurate war movie. I mean, there's a sequence that takes place with a David Bowie song, for God's sake, so I was never expecting that, but there are times where, for instance, the beginning is one of the best openings I've seen in a long, long time, and it's very tense, it's violent and all that shit, and then the comedy elements of the film, to me, don't really match up with it. I mean, while I love it all, don't get me wrong, you know, I'm just trying to give a fair review in my honest opinions. I thought that the end, the final act, although brilliant, the best part of the movie, it becomes slightly farcical, and without without the middle bit, it would have been very jarring. Like, you compare the first act to the third act, and they're nothing alike. It's like two different movies. And it's I said to my girlfriend, because that's who I saw it with afterwards, that the movie could have possibly worked better if it had been split into two. It's almost like Kill Bill Volume 1 and 2, how they are obviously similar, but Kill Bill Volume 2 is very different in style to Kill Bill Volume 1. So that's how I kind of felt with this movie. I thought, like, the earlier scenes were very different from the later scenes, and it just didn't feel like the same movie by the end of the 2.5 hours. But that's just my opinion. I mean, I'm sure a lot of people will disagree with that. Okay, well, I touched upon the opening, and like I said, it's one of the best I've seen in a long time, and that is because of Christoph Waltz's performance as Colonel Hans Lander. I think he's absolutely brilliant. The opening features him coming into a French farmhouse and basically having a conversation, although it's interrogating, really, a French dairy farmer who's hiding a Jewish family under the floorboards. And this dialogue scene is spoken almost all in French, which is brilliant, because one of my pet peeves with war movies is when it's set in like French or Germany and all the soldiers speak with perfect British accents. Like, American studios seem to think that if they give German soldiers a British accent, that makes it accurate, but hey, what can you do about that? But anyway, yeah, back to the opening. So this dialogue scene, which is mostly subtitled, lasts about 15-20 minutes, and it's one of the tensest scenes I've ever seen. Tarantino really takes the tension and cranks it to 11. It is really quite difficult to watch because you feel like you're being interrogated. You know, this French dairy farmer's having to be very careful what he says, and you feel like you're there with him, sat on the other side of a table. It's bizarre, but this is because of Christoph Waltz's performance, because he may be evil, he's batshit crazy. They call him the Jew Hunter, for Christ's sake. But he's basically just a guy who loves what he does, and it just so happens he's evil and he kills people, he kills Jewish people. But he's in love with it, and he's very kind of charismatic and bubbly, the sort of person that you could be friends with if he wasn't batshit crazy. And it's all the more unsettling for it, rather than just have the stone-faced Nazi evil killer guy. You know, you have a guy who you could have kind of a laugh with. And to me, that makes it all the more unsettling, because you see him as a human being rather than just a force of evil. And to me, that's more frightening. But yeah, it works so well in the opening scene, and it's one of the tensest moments I've seen in a long, long time. Inglorious Basterds is definitely a film that you can watch several times and get new stuff from it. Like, it is a very layered movie. For instance, this is just one example of how it's layered. There is a lot of imagery, metaphorical imagery in this film that you just wouldn't pick up on the first time you're watching it. And for example, Eli Roth plays the Bear Jew, and when he's first revealed, he walks out of a cave that looks almost like an oven, and there's like brown and grey leaves on the floor which look like ash, and he's like the Jewish prisoner coming out of the oven to beat in a Nazi's head. So that's one example of the imagery. And the climactic showdown at the cinema, where all the Nazis are basically burning alive, and that's like the imagery from the Holocaust and what happened to the Jews in the shower blocks and all that. So it's a very kind of deep, thought-provoking movie, which you wouldn't expect it to be just a film about killing Nazis, but it's much, much more than that. You know, the bastards are barely in this movie. It's a very deep, thoughtful and layered movie. A problem that a lot of people have with this movie is Eli Roth as the Bear Jew. And granted, Eli Roth's not an actor. You know, he's a director, a writer-director. He did Cabin Fever, the two Hostel movies, and the Thanksgiving trailer for Grindhouse. But I was kind of in two minds whether or not I'd like him in this movie, because it just kind of, when it was announced that he was playing the Bear Jew, you could just think, oh, well, Tarantino's just casting his friends. But he does a great, great job. I mean, Eli Roth is one of the standout performances in this movie. Nowhere near as good as Christoph Waltz. He's really in a league of his own. But Eli Roth, I enjoyed watching as much as I enjoyed watching Brad Pitt. So he was kind of the surprise of the movie to me.